thee. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me.
Father, we certainly realize that your love for us is wonderful. It's beyond our comprehension. How you could love us and give your Son, care for us, keep on forgiving us and helping us. We must grow better and stronger spiritually. Forgive us of all of our sins. Help us this night, all of us, with our mind on thy truth and meditate on it. And if need be, to obey it to it. For this we pray through Jesus' name.
Next song will be 473. 473. Oh, how I love Jesus. There is a name I love to hear, I love to sing its word. It sounds like music in my ear, the sweetest name on earth. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because he first loved me. It tells me of the Savior's love who died to set me free. It tells me of his precious blood, the sinner's perfect plea. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because he first loved me. It tells of one whose loving heart can fill my deepest woe. Through any sorrow bears a part that none can bear below. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because he first loved me. Our next song will be 180. 180. God is love. 180. Come, let us all unite to sing. God is love. Let heaven and earth and praises sing. God is love. Let every soul from sin away, each in its heart sweet music play, and sing with us for Jesus' sake, for God is love. God is love.
God is love. How happy is our portion here. God is love. His promises are spirit's cheer. God is love. He is our sun and shield by day. Our help, our hope, our strength and stay. He will be with us all the way. Our God is love. God is love. God is love. Come, let us all unite to sing that God is love.
I'd like to mark this time. The song of encouragement would be 714. 714, Trust and Obey. The song for the message of the hour will be 599, Stepping in the Light. 599. Next stand as we sing the song, you may. Trying to walk in the steps of the Savior, trying to follow our Savior and King, shaping our lives by His blessed example. Happy, how happy the songs that we bring. How beautiful to walk in the steps of the Savior, stepping in the light, stepping in the light. How beautiful to walk in the steps of the Savior. Let it pass by. Trying to walk in the steps of the Savior, upward, still upward, we'll follow our guide. When we shall see Him the King in His beauty, happy, how happy our place at His side. How beautiful to walk in the steps of the Savior, stepping in the light, stepping in the light. How beautiful to walk in the steps of the Savior. Let it pass by.
Good afternoon, good evening. It's good to see you. It's good to be with you. Appreciate your presence and appreciate your mindfulness of our duty and our obligation to gather together and worship God on the Lord's Day, but also your interest in being a part of the worship of God. And I'm thankful for your presence here this evening. I want to think about an example from the Old Testament for just a few minutes tonight. If you have your Bibles, we'll be looking at Judges. Looking at Judges chapter 6 through 8, a little bit in detail, and talking a little bit tonight about the account of Gideon. And Gideon being an example of victory for those who will work in the army or for the Lord and in His behalf. Judges chapter 6. We're going to look at some things or some characteristics in Gideon's life that we can apply to our own lives as well, and thinking about or in handling what we are having to handle in this life or at this particular time. Because I think Gideon is a perfect example of about where we stand in the world today as far as numbers of concerned people about salvation, people who are concerned about the Lord's church, about salvation, about the number of people who are disinterested, and really in this day and age it's beginning to be more so that people are beginning to take a stand against Christianity to some degree in the government and in other areas as well. So we are in precarious times to some degree as far as our Christianity is concerned. We're not quite to the state where we're in danger for our lives, I don't think, for the most part here in the United States of America. But there are winds of change and animosity towards Christianity to a great degree on every end. And so in thinking about Gideon, I want us to think about no matter how bad it gets in this world, if we live and have these particular qualities or characteristics of our lives or in our lives, that we will be successful for the Lord. Gideon is the perfect example of a man who stood in a time when the numbers were against him, and they are as they are today with us as well. Thinking about the qualities or characteristics of Gideon that made him a tool for God and victorious in the strife that he had in his life. The first thing that we can look at when we look at Gideon in his life and how we might implement it into our own lives is the idea that Gideon was a man with humility. A man of humility. He was able to be used by God because the characteristic in his life was that of a humble individual. If you look at Judges chapter 16, or chapter 6 and verse 15, it says, "And he said unto him, O my Lord, wherewith shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is poor in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." God, through an angel, the Lord through an angel, appeared to Gideon and told him that he was going to rescue or save Israel using Gideon as the tool to accomplish what God wanted to happen in this particular situation. And this is the response of Gideon towards that angel when he called on him to do the work of the Lord. He said, I'm of a very small tribe, or I'm a small member in a very unnoticeable tribe, and I'm the least even in my family. The tools that I have, or what I have, don't seem to be quite what would be necessary or needed in order for you to accomplish what you would accomplish, Lord. Now, we can look at it from a couple of different standpoints as far as the attitude that Gideon had. You can think that he was making excuses to some degree, but Gideon was a man of character and quality, so I'm going to look at it from the standpoint of Gideon thought that maybe there was some things that he needed to have in his own life to make him successful. And I think that that's probably a good quality to have as well as far as a humble spirit is concerned. When we get overconfident, when we think we've got it made, or when we think that we have all that we need in order to accomplish things, then often it causes us to stumble or to fall. We don't need to be overconfident, but we need to be humble and recognize that we need God in our lives to help us through the things that we need to do or accomplish. And if we will but submit ourselves to God, He will bless us and use us appropriately so that we can be successful in life. Humility. Jesus led off the Sermon on the Mount talking about humility. He didn't use that word, but He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." A poor spirit, one is humble, one that recognizes his need for Jesus Christ, the need for God, is the groundwork or the foundation upon which God builds strong, successful people in the church. James said it this way in James chapter 4 verse 10, "Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He shall lift you up." We have to put ourselves in a position on our knees and in need of God before He will pick us up and make us into the kind of people that can be used in His service. So the first thing is humility. The second thing that I think that we can see in the life of Gideon that made him a tool that God could use was the fact that he was a man of action. If you look at the context of Gideon's life, he was living in the land of Israel at the time when the Midianites had invaded the land of Israel, and they had basically taken over. The Israelites were running and hiding and in cover, and everything that they did so that they would have something to eat and be able to survive, they had to do it in secret. And when this angel appeared unto Gideon, he was threshing the wheat, but he was doing it in a private place by the wine press where he could not be spotted or found, so that the Midians would not take what he had away from him. But he was working. He was doing what he needed to do in order to accomplish the things in his life. He was busy doing what he had to do. God is looking for people who are busy. Not so busy that they can't do the things of God, but people who are people of action. People who are willing to step up and do what is necessary in order to accomplish the things of God. He's not looking for couch potatoes or people who are watchers or looking to see what's going on. He's looking for people of action. And that's what we need to be if we're going to be successful in God. We need to be people of action. When things are called upon or when we're called upon to take part in things that are of the Lord's business or of the Lord's service, we need to be willing and able to step up. I know that when we look at the life of Gideon, a lot of times we don't see somebody that just jumped right into the fray. On several occasions, Gideon asked God to give him evidence, proof that he was the man for the job, the man to do it. He said, if you're going to use me, prove it by doing this. And he said, I'm going to lay a fleece out on the ground. And what I want you to do is, God, I want that fleece to be in the morning time when the dew settles. I want just to be dew on the fleece and the ground to be dry. And God did that by miraculous means. And Gideon said, excuse me, don't be angry with me, but now I want you to do just the opposite. I want the ground to be have the dew on it and the fleece be dry. And God did that as well. He proved that He was working with it. Now, we're not going to have the opportunity or the privilege of being able to see miracles in our life in response to God's call for us to do His bidding. But we have the miraculous resurrection of Jesus Christ. We have the miraculous Bible before us. And so they really don't have any excuse to, have never seen a miracle. God hasn't spoken to me, as a means of trying to justify ourselves for not being busy in doing the Lord's work. God has given us ample evidence and proof of His existence, His love, and His support and guidance in our lives so that we can move forward and be the kind of people that God would have us to be in our efforts to please God. But Gideon was a man of action. It says in Matthew chapter 25, verses 28 and 29, thinking about our own lives and what Jesus had to say, he said, in the parable of the talents, talking about the man with the 10 talents, he said, take therefore the talent from him and give it unto him that hath 10 talents. For unto everyone that hath shall be given, and to he that hath abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. We think about action and being people of action. God is going to bless us if we will be workers for Him. Those people are not working. The one-talent man, he didn't take what he had and use it, and God didn't bless it. As a matter of fact, he took that one talent and gave it to the man who was working and had an abundance of talents already and gave him more. And that's the truth or the principle that is behind the blessings of God. If you're busy and making account of the things that God has given to you, God is going to continue to bless you, and you will be more successful and have greater opportunities so that you can be what God wants you to be. When we think about the talents of Gideon, we need to think about what God had to say about him in Judges 6 and verse 12. It says, and the angel of the Lord appeared unto him and said unto him, the Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor. God thought that Gideon was a man of valor. No, in this particular situation, Gideon didn't necessarily think that he was a man of valor. He didn't think he had a lot of courage in his life. And evidently the people who were around Gideon didn't think that he was a man of valor, one that would stand up and be courageous in the fight. He was behind a wine press doing work, not standing up against the Midianites. The people weren't surrounding him and summoning Gideon to lead them into fight. But God saw within Gideon the ability to have virtue or courage in order to accomplish what he wanted to have. And many times we don't see ourselves as courageous people, and God may see us as that. When we think about it, if you look at what Peter says in 2 Peter 1 and adding of the graces to our lives, the first one in that list is that of virtue. And besides this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue. Virtue, the courage to move forward and to do what needs to be done. It was a bad situation, a bad time for Gideon because the Midianites overwhelmed the land. The enemy was full of, or all around. And realistically, that is true today as well. when you stand for the right, when you stand for truth, you're going to find out pretty quickly that there are many people who don't believe in the things of the Bible and the truth, and especially when it comes to what needs to be done in order to be saved. When we think about what virtue is, Adam Clark says, true virtue is not a tame and passive thing. It requires great energy and boldness, for its very essence is firmness, manliness, and independence. So we're talking about a quality characteristic that causes us to stand up, that we have to have within our armament as individuals that are working for Jesus Christ. True virtue. Gideon was a man of strength. He was a man of power. Judges 6 and verse 14. The Lord looked upon him and said, Go in this thy might, and thou shalt save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have not I sent thee? God recognized within Gideon power and strength, the ability to accomplish what needed to be done. As I step back and I look at my own life, and as you look at your life, would you consider yourself to be a powerful person? I am a strong, powerful person. I think for the most part we don't think about ourselves in that light. God gives us the power, the ability to have power that we may not even see within our own self. Paul said this in 2 Corinthians 12, 9 and 10. He said, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then am I strong. Our power is not our strength, or is not relying upon us as individuals, but it is being able to rely upon God and the power of God working through us. Paul recognized this in his own life. He was trying to find a way or a means to be better physically speaking in this particular situation. He had a problem that he wanted to be eliminated in his life so that he could be stronger physically and be able to accomplish more. We don't know what the thorn in the flesh was, but we do know that it seemed to Paul that it was a thing that held him back. But God said, no, you have the power that you need within yourself right now through me. And Paul came to recognize that ability within his own self in relying upon Christ and the cross and the things that God provided for him, rather than being able to be relieved of that particular situation that stood to him, to stand in his way, as it seemed to him. And so Gideon was a man of strength. He relied upon God, and God gave him the power and the strength to accomplish the things that he expected of him. He'll do the same for you and I if we will but be the man that God will have us to be. Gideon also was a man who had great faith. He trusted in God. Gideon is a member of that exclusive club in Hebrews 11, the chapter about faith. Beginning at verse 32, there the writer of Hebrews says, And what shall I say more? Or what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, and of Barak, and of Samson, of Jephthah, of David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, and turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Here we have a list of individuals and accomplishments of men of great faith, at which the top of that list of additional ones after he goes through Hebrews 11 is Gideon, a man who had great success for the Lord in accomplishing the things that God set out for him to do because of his faith. And we can look at Gideon, and we can look at all those individuals that are in Hebrews chapter 11 and think about how we can apply faith. How much we trust in God is going to determine how much we accomplish in God. Do we truly trust in God? Faith, the belief that God will accomplish in us what he has promised to accomplish so that we might be successful in the Lord's church and successful in accomplishing eternal life and being saved throughout the ages. Proverbs said it this way in Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. We just have to have the faith and the trust in God to be able to move forward so that we can accomplish what God has us to do. Gideon is a great example of us because of his obedience. You think about Judges 6 and verses 25 through 27, it says, And it came to pass the same night that the Lord said unto him, Take thy father's young bullock, even the second bullock of 7 years old, and throw it down the altar, and throw down the altar of Baal that thy father hath, and cut down the grove that is by it. And build an altar unto the Lord thy God upon the top of this rock, and in the ordered place, and take the second bullock and offer a burnt sacrifice with the wood of the grove which thou shalt cut down. Then Gideon took 10 men of his servants, and did as the Lord had said unto him. So it was, because he feared his father's household and the men of the city, that he could not do it by day, that he did it by night. When you look at the life of Gideon, here God gives him a specific order to do. You go down here, and Baal was the primary object of worship in the land at this time. That was the god of the Midianites. And they had set up an altar, and they had the grove, and they had all this. And involved in all this was all the people of the city, even going down to Gideon's own father. It was his father who was involved in this. So Gideon is going to have to stand up against his family. He's going to have to stand up against the city in doing what God has called on him to do. Tear down the altar, tear down the groves, build another altar, and offer sacrifice to God in front of all these people. That took a lot of courage. That took a lot of strength. That took a will to do it. It says he did it at night because of a bit of fear, but he moved forward and did exactly what God told him to do. I don't think that God said, you do it in the daytime. He just said, do it. And so he followed the directions of God in doing that and was successful in that. It created problems for it, but when we do what's right, sometimes it is going to create problems in our lives. But we have to move forward and do it. Gideon is a great example of his obedience to God in spite of all that stood in his way in accomplishing what God had put for him to do. But you know, God was victorious because he was a man of power. He was a man who worshiped God. You think about Judges 6 and verse 24. Then Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and called it Jehovah Shalom. And to this day it is yet Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Gideon was a man who wanted to be a worshiper of God. Even in the time when nobody else was, or very few were, in the land of Israel, he was still a faithful man of God. That's why God called upon him. He's our example of people who will strive to worship God when others are not. It seems to be in this day and age that worship is not a priority of most people. There are too many other things in life to keep people from thinking about God and worshiping and honoring God as Gideon did and as we should. And then we think about Gideon, we think about the fact that he gave the honor and glory to God. Judges 7 and verse 18. When I blow with the trumpet, and I and all that are with me, then blow ye the trumpets, and also on every side of all the camp, and say, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. We know that God chose Gideon, and then Gideon was given the responsibility to choose the army. And he had an army, a grand army. And God whittled it down to where there were just 300 people in this army to fight the massive army of the Midianites. And he gives them the instructions on how to do it. Take the pitcher and the lantern, and to shout and blow the trumpet. But the last thing that he says, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. Gideon did not take the honor or the glory going into the fight, nor after the fight with the Midianites. But he put God first and foremost and gave him the glory and the honor of the success that he accomplished in the name of the Lord. And so we need to be very careful that as we think about how we live our lives, are we giving the honor and the glory to the Lord? And it's interesting to note in Gideon's life that it was just not in this particular time that Gideon called upon the Lord or gave the Lord the glory and the honor with the success or the fight that he was involved in. If you go down and you look at Judges chapter 8, at the very end of Gideon's account, in verse 22 it says, Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, Rule thou over us, both thou and thy son, and thy son's son also. For thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian. And Gideon said unto them, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. Gideon recognized his place. He knew who was first and who had to be first. If the people were going to be faithful to God, and that he was not to be the one that was to be put in a position of authority or a direct leader. They had established in the land of Israel how things were to be controlled or run. It was a theocracy. God was in control, and he had given them the law and the things that they needed to follow. And if the people of Israel had done what was supposed to be done, then God would have blessed them. But we notice after Gideon dies that they go right back off into idolatry and don't follow through in the success that they had being rescued by God from the Midianites. You know, Gideon also gives an example of people who follow God and will follow explicitly the commands of God despite the idea or what might come to our minds as to why this needs to be done or this makes no sense to me. And that's is shown in Judges chapter 7 in the choosing of Gideon's army. You know, at first they have a great big army there, and God says to Gideon in verse 2 of chapter 7, the people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, thine own hand hath saved me. Now therefore go to and proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and afraid, let him return, depart early from the Mount Gilead. And there returned to the people 20 and 2,000, and there remained 10,000. So we see the exodus from the army was massive. More than half was being depleted. And the description of the army of the Midianites was as if they were grasshoppers. There were so many of them that they just couldn't be numbered. So we're looking at going from over 30,000 down to 10,000, fighting against an army that we don't know how many, but it was massive in number. And God tells Gideon again, he says, no, it's still too many. And he gives him specific directions on how to whittle the army down to the number that God would have. And he goes and he tells them how to drink the water. And he says that those who picked the water up or drank the water by lifting the water up with their hands and lapped it out of their hands was the number that they took, and that was 300. How in the world can you fight against an army with just 300? That would have been my question. I would have been wondering, how in the world is this going to work out? But Gideon trusted God to accomplish what he had promised to accomplish. When we think about our own lives, do we trust God with the accomplishment or success in our lives as he has promised if we are faithful and do things in spite of the things looking not exactly like we think they should look for success to be at our disposal? And then finally, when I think about Gideon and the life that he lived and the success that he had, and I try to look at my own life and compare it to the idea of success in it, I can't help but think about what we can expect when we live for the Lord. And this is not exactly what I would like to see or what I would like to have seen in the story of Gideon, but this is found in Judges chapter 8, verses 33 through 35. And I think this is important for us to understand if we are to be faithful to God. Judges 8 and 33 says, and it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned again and went a-whoring after Balaam, and made Baal-Bereth their god. That's disheartening in that respect, because the people failed to live up to the success that Gideon had given them and the possibilities that laid out before them. But even more disheartening as far as that goes, or what I think we could expect more, is found in the last two verses of that chapter. It says, and the children of Israel remembered not the Lord their God, who delivered them out of the hands of all their enemies on every side. Verse 35, neither shewed they kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, namely Gideon, according to all the goodness which he had shewed unto Israel. That to me tells a lot about how life is when you work and serve the Lord. Gideon offered unto Israel through the Lord a great success. He served those people, fought for those people, led those people, and then what does the Bible commentary say about how those people treated Gideon? They showed him no kindness to the house of Gideon. In spite of all that he tried to do, which was right and good, those people showed him. They did not respond in kind. They did, in fact, mistreated him and his family in spite of all that. And thinking about how we try to serve the Lord, and I guess it's true in every aspect of life. We would like, when we do good things and try to work hard and be successful and help people out, we would like to have a little pat on the back, or you've done a good job, or well done, that sort of thing. But Many times that's not going to be the reward that we get in this life. And many times that is the means or the way in which the devil gets to a lot of people as far as serving the Lord successfully and faithfully throughout their lives. Well, nobody noticed. Nobody told me I did a good job. Nobody was there to support me. And so they just give up on the Lord. Gideon was faithful throughout his life in spite of the fact that those people who he served and worked with and worked for gave him no honor or glory. And as a matter of fact, mistreated him and his family. We can expect that in our lives. That's a sad commentary about this world, but that's the truth of it. And we need to be aware of that and not let the devil get to us and discourage us when we try to live for the Lord and do what's right. Gideon was a godly man living in a very difficult time, who is a great example to us of those who will, if they do what God wants them to do and have the kind of characteristics that he had, will be successful in life. How much are we like Gideon? Do we have these characteristics in our lives? Do we exhibit them in our lives? You think about it, are we busy serving the Lord in humility? Are we acting strong and courageous in the fight for truth? Do we trust and obey what the Lord tells us to do in spite of what we think or believe? And do we seek to honor and glorify God in our lives and in our actions? It starts by submitting ourselves to the Lord. Judges 6 and verse 12 says, the angel of the Lord appeared unto him and said unto him, the Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor. God has promised to be with us. Jesus Christ, when he gave the Great Commission, said, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. We have the exact same promise in a little bit different words as far as the promise to be with us if we will fight for the Lord. But we have to be a Christian in order to receive that promise and have that hope. Have we been obedient to what Jesus said to do to become a Christian? Repenting of our sins and confessing Jesus as the Son of God and being baptized? And have we lived faithfully to that commitment? If not, tonight's a great night to make the change and become what God would have you be, so that you can have the success that God has promised to those who live faithfully to Him. If you need to make a change, let me encourage you to do it now while we stand.
We walk with the Lord in the light of His word. What glory He sheds on our way. When we do His good will, He abides with us here. And with all who live, trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. Not a shadow can rise, not a cloud in the sky, but His softly drives it away. Not a doubt nor a fear, not a sigh nor a tear, and abide while we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. In fellowship sweet, we will sit at His feet, or will walk by His
in Jesus, but to trust and know
Please raise your hand and serve us for supper this time. Our God and our Father in heaven, come in now, thankful for the many blessings you've given us as Christians. We should be with these that spread the purposes of the body of Christ, that do so in manner acceptable and pleasing in thy sight. This is in Jesus' name.
Like my Father, we ask you now to bless this cup for divine, as your Son's blood. The Lord takes up and do so in please in your sight, Christ.
Would anyone else like that Bible story this time?
Thank you again for being here today. Hope you can be back with us Wednesday evening for our midweek Bible study at 7 p.m. I did fail to get the flyers made up completely, so I hope to have those. We'll have those done Wednesday for our mail out, so we can grab them then. But just be mindful of those dates, May 5th through the 8th. Our final song for this evening service will be 572. 572. Send the light. If you'd like to stand as we sing this song, you may. Sing the first and last verse. There's a call comes ringing o'er the restless waves. Send the light, send the light. There are souls to rescue, there are souls to save. Send the light, send the light, send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine from shore to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine forevermore. Let us not grow weary in the work of love. Send the light, send the light. Let us gather to for a crowd above. Send the light, send the light, send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine from shore to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine forevermore.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful day that you have given us. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity you've given us to come together to Lord and study the Word. Father, we ask that you be with those mentally sick and those who are in need, and we hope that they might find comfort